Check 1 2. Check. Check.
Good morning. We have quorum, so welcome everyone to this meeting of the Environment and Climate Protection Committee of Tuesday the 17th of October 2017. We'll actually start with a ceremonial part before we begin the formal meeting. I will go to the podium over there and another microphone to do that.
Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. On behalf of Mayor Jim Watson, City of Ottawa, and my colleagues at City Council, it's my pleasure to proclaim the week of October 16th to 22nd, 2017 as Waste Reduction Week in Ottawa. I've got a proclamation to go with that. Whereas the needless waste of energy, resources, water, and the generation of solid waste, pollution, and greenhouse gases are recognized as pressing global environmental problems, whereas municipal governments have an important role to play in providing leadership and in actively promoting waste reduction, reuse, recycling, composting, and other conservation measures, attendu que le Conseil municipal d'Ottawa s'emploie à prendre l'initiative pour mener notre collectivité vers une durabilité accrue de l'environnement, et attendu que des personnes, des collectivités, des entreprises, des organisations et des administrations de partout au Canada se sont engagées à sensibiliser ensemble la population à ces enjeux au cours de la semaine canadienne de réduction des déchets. Therefore, I, on behalf of the Mayor, proclaim the City of Ottawa, do hereby proclaim Ottawa, get this right, October 16th, 22nd, 2017 Waste Reduction Week in Ottawa. To celebrate Waste Reduction Week, I felt it was fitting to mention an important milestone. 2017 marks 20 years since the City of Ottawa first introduced the Take It Back program. Pour célébrer la semaine de réduction des déchets, j'ai pensé qu'il était de plus approprié de souligner une étape importante L'année 2017 marque le 20e anniversaire du lancement du programme Rapportez-les par la Ville d'Ottawa. The program has been helping residents properly dispose of household items that should not go in the garbage or recycling bins. It connects them with retailers that take them back and dispose of them safely. Ottawa est la première municipalité canadienne à avoir mis en œuvre un tel programme qui a commencé en 1997 avec 3 produits et 16 détaillants automobiles et qui continue de prendre l'expansion. Il regroupe actuellement plus de 500 partenaires qui acceptent plus de 180 produits différents. As a gesture of how important the Take It Back program is for Ottawa residents, it is my pleasure to present a certificate of recognition to Colin Guilbeault. He is the owner of Guilbeault Automotives, an original program partner. Le programme Rapportez-les encourage les détaillants à assumer la responsabilité des produits qu'ils vendent. Guilbeault Automotives has been accepting items such as car batteries, antifreeze, motor oil, tires, and car parts since November 1997. Thank you, Colin, for your commitment to ensuring the items you accept are properly disposed of and do not end up in the landfill. I'd like to ask Colin to come forward and accept this certificate of recognition. Over there. This is where they direct us. Okay. You're receiving it. Thank you, merci. Now we'll go back to the scheduled meeting. Thank you. Merci. To begin the meeting then, do we have any declarations of interest? Seeing none, confirmation of minutes for this Tuesday the 19th of September 2017. As confirmed, carried. Okay. Communications, response to inquiries. We have a response from staff, a staff assessment of Waste Watch Ottawa's report. Which is related to the first item, but I will go through the 2 items on the agenda. We'll have a verbal update, recent developments in waste reduction and diversion. We have a presentation on that and a delegation. And at this point, I would remind anyone in the audience who may like to speak to this that you can register to do so at the desk to my right, your left, and you would have 5 minutes to present. At the moment, we have just one, as I mentioned. Item 2, sump pump backup power rebate program. Is that item carried? All right. Thank you. So we'll return to the main item then. We'll receive a presentation from staff on the city's waste reduction and diversion efforts. C'est une question importante qui a reçu peu d'attention au cours de ce mandat de conseil. Aujourd'hui, nous avons la chance d'en discuter. Today's presentation is an opportunity for staff to give us an update on how the city is approaching waste and preparing for new provincial legislation. The committee would also like to acknowledge Waste Watch Ottawa for their vigilance and the work that went into their recent report on the city's waste diversion efforts. While there's always room for improvement in what the city does, your report has helped bring attention to the city's recycling and green bin programs. As I mentioned, public delegations are welcome to speak following the staff presentation. Of course, we'll have the presentation followed by delegations and then go to questions. And Mr. Wiley, you'll be presenting? Okay.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to do a short presentation on recent developments.
My apologies. There is one motion we need to formally do to receive this presentation because this was added to the agenda in recognition of its importance and the interest. I can read it right? So, no reason not to. Vice Chair, I'll turn to the Vice Chair, Shirelli, to read the motion, please.
Okay. Whereas there's not been recent opportunity for staff to provide committee with a report to serve as an update on how the City of Ottawa deals with the issue of municipal waste, and whereas it may be prudent to receive a public update with respect to timely issue of ongoing developments in waste reduction and diversion, therefore be it resolved that Environment and Climate Protection Committee waives Section 83(4)A of the procedure bylaw to receive this presentation from staff with respect to recent developments in waste reduction and diversion, and further approve that the presentation and its accompanying documentation be considered to have met the requirement for staff to provide written report on this matter.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And good morning again. We're pleased to provide this short presentation on recent developments in waste reduction and diversion within the City of Ottawa. We're at the beginning of a fundamental change in the way waste is managed in Ontario and how, as a city, we will manage waste. Bill 151 establishes framework that requires producers to take full responsibility for the environmental and financial management of their products and packaging at end of life, blue and black box material, and to expand those recycling programs. Another provincial initiative is to develop and implement a food and organic waste action plan with a possible landfill ban on food waste. With respect to blue and black box materials, municipal councils will have the opportunity to decide on the level of involvement they wish to have in waste diversion program delivery, ranging from being an active service provider to having no involvement in the program whatsoever. The city's planning focus of waste diversion efforts over the last couple of years has been on the green bin and on changing legislation. Knowing changes were on the horizon, staff have been planning for the potential impacts associated with Bill 151. A review of the green bin program is ongoing, and we are now awaiting pending legislation on the action plan on organic waste. Staff are also participating in a municipal coalition around Bill 151 that includes negotiating with producers and understanding better the impacts of transitioning to full producer responsibility. Staff conducted a waste characterization study which aimed to get a better sense of what items residents are placing in their blue and black box, their green bin, and their garbage to better inform our promotion and education activities. While we're waiting to hear more concrete details around Bill 151 changes, our promotion and education efforts have been focused on the green bin and diversion in multi-residential buildings. The following slides provide some insight into the different promotion and education activities that we've rolled out this year. Social media hits combined with traditional promotion, for example, bus panel ads, result in about 180,000 views per day. City focuses on digital promotion, which allows the ability to adapt to changing trends and is also a measurable avenue of promotion. Staff attended 34 events with about 10,000 interactions with the public. Promotion also happens at hazardous waste depots, in schools, on our collection calendars, and as I said, through social media. We distributed about 282,000 collection calendars in 2017. We also used truck panels on 110 of our waste collection trucks. One focus of the Recyclers campaign is green bin participation, which is, we know, something we can improve upon. Also, the very popular Recollect email reminder goes out to about 68,000 households each week to remind them of their collection day. I also wanted to take a moment to highlight some of the good work we're doing at the landfill. Staff have leveraged GPS technology to achieve above industry average compaction rates at the landfill. Another successful project was to fill in on side slopes. This was previously unused space of the landfill that our engineer and supervisor determined was usable space under our certificate of approval, and this gained us an additional year of lifespan. The current estimated life left at Trail Road Waste Facility is a minimum of 24 years. The timeline for provincial legislation is moving very quickly and is as follows. The Food and Organic Waste Framework will be released by the province in December. Stewardship Ontario has started consultations with municipalities last week. They will also be holding public consultations across the province. A draft plan is intended to be released on December 22nd. A final plan is scheduled to be released on February 15th. And city staff intend to table a strategy paper in Q1 of 2018 with a recommended direction on recycling and organics. And thank you. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wiley, Mr. No. As you see, there's a lot of activity that has been going on all this time, but because there'd been no formal occasion to come before this committee and council to update on what was happening, I thought it was valuable to take this opportunity both to get that brief presentation, to let people know of the amount of work that's going on behind the scenes with staff involvement in the provincial legislation, in the working groups there, and then give us as committee members the opportunity to ask questions, and of course the public a chance to present. So at the moment we will go to presentations first. I believe at the moment we still just have the one. Duncan Burry has asked to present. Please come up. Yep. Okay. Right. Please press your microphone. There, the button. There we go.
Thank you very much.
You have 5 minutes, as you know. Thank you.
Chair, and thank you for the acknowledgement of the work of Waste Watch Ottawa. I'm here also with my colleagues Bill Toms and Brian Tansey, who are in the audience, and Christy Chechon, who is one of the University of Ottawa students who helped with this project. Basically, we want to say very quickly off the top that the staff report confirms that the data we used is accurate, the sources are authoritative, and the conclusions regarding the lifespan of Trail Road are in fact consistent with what staff have argued. We do differ only really on the issue of what you need to do in response to that and what you need to do to work to extend the life of the trail. Here's the graph that staff report has from the Municipal Benchmarking Network, and we would argue that in actual fact this graph is entirely consistent with the data that we have presented in our report. The red line is Ottawa. We're basically not performing at the level we should compared to other municipalities in Ontario, and the Municipal Benchmarking study basically says exactly the same thing. So there's no difference of opinion on this regard, we don't believe. Here's another way of looking at it. Kilograms per household recycled and composting, again, Ottawa being the red line. These lines are generally going down, and that's because of the amount of newspaper, which is no longer in the black box program. The readership, obviously, in terms of hard paper copies of newspapers is falling, so that shows across the board for most municipalities. But again, you'll note here that there are municipalities on that graph where those lines are going upwards, and municipalities are in fact, despite this, improving their diversion rates. The waste composition study. The objective of the study was to gather data on participation and composition of the waste material. That's quoted from the study terms of reference at the very beginning. The staff report suggests that it wasn't designed to determine set out or participation, so I'm not too sure what that is and why there's a difference there. But the point basically is to say that participation and waste composition are closely related. If you've got a poor rate of participation, you've probably got a weak level of waste diversion. And when we look at the data from the AET study, which we used in our report, the yellow line is the green bin program. And I note that Kevin Wiley identified clearly the green bin as something that needs some improvement. And this graph from the waste composition study clearly shows that. So, you know, the best we're doing on the waste comp study in terms of participation is about 55%. And clearly, if we want to up our diversion rates, that has to improve significantly. Here's another way of looking at it, and this is where the link between participation and the diversion rate links. This is again from the waste composition study. You get very high levels of divertible material, compostable material, and recycling material in the waste, because if people aren't participating, where do they put it? They put it in the garbage. And these again are rates which really flag for you that you've got a problem with these programs. Life expectancy, again, we would argue that our report is entirely consistent with the staff analysis of this. The projections from the Trail Road Monitoring and Operating Report, which talk about a rate of extension dependent upon diversion to 2070, is entirely consistent with what we've reported on here. And here's the analysis we've done. The blue line there, which gets you to about 2070, is a diversion rate of 65%. So if you increase our rate, which is right now in 2015 was 42%, if we go from 45 to 65%, we basically get another 20 years in the life expectancy of Trail Road. And the bottom line is really at the moment, more waste is going to disposal than is either desirable or necessary. And our analysis shows that for every extra 1% in the rate of waste diversion, you get 1 extra year of life expectancy of Trail Road. So this is significant. So you improve from 45% to 65%, you get 20 more years in Trail Road. So why is this important, and what do we need to do to work to improve waste diversion? There are clearly going to be environmental and political challenges with finding a new landfill. If and when we get to that point, it will take a decade or more at least, I would project. The replacement for Trail Road could cost well over $200 million, and in fact will be maybe very difficult or impossible to locate within city limits. If anybody's got a location within Ottawa they think we can put an expanded Trail Road in, why don't you let us know? The fact is there's really very unlikely we'll find a new site. So we need to husband the resource we have. The provincial changes to recycling funding that staff just talked about will not change the city's responsibility for garbage or the green bin program. And in fact, the province is talking about banning the disposal of organics, which puts more pressure on upping the performance of the green bin program. There will be challenges associated with this switchover, municipal assets, contracts, and remember there's a June 2018 election coming up next year, so heaven only knows what that means. And transitioning is going to take some time. There is, however, no reason to delay program improvements, and that, in fact, is something which is happening across Ontario. Many municipalities are working continuously.
Excuse me for a second. Although your 5 minutes are up, with the indulgence of the committee, can we give the only delegation a couple more minutes to sum up? Is that all right? Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes? Thank you, Councillor. 2 more slides. Modest improvements could improve the diversion rate, and we have, in fact, in our report listed about 20 ideas, which we think are modest. We're not talking about big numbers and big dollars here. We're talking about across the board improving on a number of different fronts. There are significant problems with the green bin, which staff have acknowledged, and the less you do now, the closer the day comes when Trail Road is going to be full. So here's some final questions. Why not improve the green bin program? It's not part of the recycling discussion that the province is initiating. Why continue to run a poor program that's not following best practices or meeting top performance standards? If industry ultimately takes over the recycling programs, as in fact possible, and I don't have any particular objection to that idea, why bequeath a poor program instead of a well-operating one that the city can encourage industry to maintain? Why allow Trail Road to fill with any more waste than is absolutely necessary, given it is likely a very difficult to replace or likely an irreplaceable asset? And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Brockington at the moment on the list. Let me know if you'd like to ask questions of the delegation. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation and all the work and research that you and your team have done, and for shining the spotlight on this matter. I certainly agree that it's so backward to think about digging a big hole in the country and backing trucks up, dumping your load and then covering it with dirt. That is what they did centuries ago, and for us even to contemplate that this is a possibility 30, 40 years from now, and buying another landfill is just not something that we should even be contemplating. When I look at your the table in your report, there are some municipalities who are diverting waste pretty well. York, 64%, Halton, 57%. And then there are other municipalities at the lower end, Thunder Bay, 26%, Calgary, 28%. Have you been able to look at the determinants that have proved to be successful in those municipalities? What are they doing well that we are not doing well? And maybe we don't need to focus too much on the folks who are not performing well, but maybe there are some very obvious things that they're not doing that would explain why their diversion rates are so low.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thunder Bay and London don't have green bin programs, which explains one of the reasons why they're low on the totem pole. Most of the other municipalities are doing a broad brush of activities that focus on a number of things. They certainly spend way more money on promotion than Ottawa does. Historically, Ottawa spent less than 50 cents per household per year. I'm pleased to see that this year it looks like it's going to be $350,000. That's double what it was the year before. And that level of promotion and education is easily spent by other municipalities that in fact are spending something in the order of $1 per household and up to $1.50 per household spending on programs. There's a lot bigger effort put into focusing on multi-residential high-rise buildings. For example, yesterday there was a story in the Toronto Star when the City of Toronto was doing an experiment with using garbage chutes in old buildings for organics and asking residents to take their recyclables and their garbage by hand down to the bin in the basement. Markham, for example, has put a lot of focus on textiles. They have a neat little program. If you're a senior and you don't participate in the program because you can't lug your blue box to the curb, you can register with the city. The driver and the truck hauler will take their materials from the porch, put it in a truck, put the green bin, put the bin back. So there's a multiplicity of things, and we've listed about 20. One of the big things which is done in some communities is clear bags. That's a major change. It's something we're suggesting the city needs to look at when it comes around to this ultimately in terms of garbage, because that does make an impact. When I talked to somebody at City of Markham, they said when we put clear bags in, 10,000 tons disappeared. And it didn't end up in Brampton, as far as we know. So there are lots of things. It's a long list, but there's no one big silver bullet on this. There's a multiplicity of options which all need to be approached.
Again, thank you for your efforts.
Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Chair. I will say, first off, I was very pleased to provide some support to the production of this report, and I think it's engendered a good conversation around this table and around the city. So thank you for your efforts there, and thank you for letting me participate in that. I do have one question for staff before I get back to the delegation. Really quick, one of the top line items out of Waste Watch Ottawa's report was 1% increase equals 1 year extra life. Does staff agree with that? Is that the math? Chair, we'd have to get back to the councillor on that.
Okay, it's I mean it's a nice easy way to talk to residents where we are coming into an election, and it's an easy stat to understand. If we can increase that rate by 1% extra, we get 1 more year. I think that's a clear and compelling message, and clear and compelling messages are a part of what we're talking about today. Trying to get residents to put the right thing in the right bin is critical. Staff showed us some metrics around, you know, how many people have seen a piece of digital collateral, and I'm not sure that people having seen a piece of digital collateral is translating into changed behavior. You have about 24 recommendations in here, a couple of dozen recommendations. If we were to implement all of them, Duncan, how much do you think that would cost, and by how much would it increase diversion?
I don't have an answer, but we're not talking big money here. I think if we were to spend the kind of money that's being spent in the other municipalities here, I don't see any reason why Ottawa shouldn't be expending the same level of funds that are being paid, you know, to divert these materials that Toronto, Hamilton, Durham, York are all spending. But no, we have not costed this out. The one area where we did look at costs was on promotion and education, and that's, I don't have a slide for that here, it's in our report. It's clearly an area where the city has really underperformed compared to everybody else. I think we are pretty much on the bottom of what we spent over the last 10 years on this issue. And keeping promotion going and ongoing and that outreach, this isn't something you do once, as I think you just suggested, this is an ongoing effort. And you need to be spending that kind of $350, $400,000 kind of amount of money annually to keep these programs going. But no, we haven't costed it. No.
So when we say promotion, it's probably not enough to tell people, hey, you should use your green bin. Is there a way we could use limited resources to better get the message out there?
Well, I think we need to work on high-rise buildings and high-density properties for sure and make that easier. And this is where, as I said, the Toronto example is something which is worth watching at this experiment they're doing. Clear bags would help, frankly, in all of this. Maybe considering the kind of liners and plastic bags. As far as I know, there's really no particular problem at a composting plant separating organics from a plastic bag that might have gone into a green bin. If people are worried about the yuck factor, we need to be looking at that. Most other municipalities do, in fact, allow compostable plastic-lined bags, and we don't here in Ottawa. So, there are little things like that we can do to make this easier for people.
Those were my questions for you. I don't know if staff want to maybe give a quick response on the compostable liners, the plastic compostable liners.
Chair, we do currently, as we know, our organics are going to OrgaWorld. Under the collection contract, currently, there is a provision to include plastics within the organics program. And that's one of the things we're looking at moving forward. And as I said, we'll be tabling something Q1 2018 on a strategy, both on moving to producer responsibility, transitioning to producer responsibility, and on the organics program.
You mentioned that the food and organics aspect of Bill 151 could include a food ban in landfills. How likely do staff think that is?
Chair, we don't know for sure, but that's some of the indications we're getting out of the MOE in some of their discussion papers.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Shirley.
Thanks. On the compostable plastics, I really want to find out what the truth is on this. So when you come back with your recommendation on that, I also want you to come back with the full summary of all the recommendations you brought to us recommending against it when we last had this debate. Because I want to find out which of them is true. Okay?
Chair, we can do that. I would hazard a guess that it's probably more of a philosophical approach to the program than anything, but we can certainly give you a fulsome costing and discussion on that.
Very good.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions for the delegation? I'm sure we do for staff, but thank you very much, Mr. Burry. And before you leave, I do want to note the work that you and Brian and Bill and others students have done on this. I certainly didn't see it as a confrontational approach. I know you never intended it to be. In fact, I asked that it be brought to committee here, or that this issue be brought to committee not as a defense against your report, but rather a timely opportunity to you raise some important issues. The questions were out there. We hadn't received an update for a long time, and this seemed like a prime occasion with the impending changes provincially to do all of that. So thank you for your work.
Yeah, and we certainly appreciate the positive response. Thank you, Councillor.
So I have a list at the moment for staff, Brockington and then Shirelli. Please let me know if you'd like to be added.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. To staff, will you acknowledge that the city is not doing everything it can to divert waste from the landfill?
Chair, it's a complicated issue, and I know the Waste Watch report has definitely provided us with some good suggestions, and we're well aware of what other municipalities are doing. We do have realities in place in terms of contracts that stop us from doing certain things. We know there's a transition to full producer responsibility. I think right now we're in a period of shifting gears. I think as I demonstrated in the 3 slides of education and promotion that we've conducted this year, that we've got a fairly full court press on that. We may differ on whether you spend on traditional advertising or whether you leverage social media, but I think we've got a very robust promotion education program.
I'll answer my own question. I think we can do a lot more than what the city is doing now. Do you believe that you understand why people who choose not to recycle or use the green bin are making those choices? Do you have that type of intelligence from our residents who choose not to use it, why that is the case, so you can target and identify the issues that they raise as for reasons to ensure that we can have a greater uptake?
Chair, we do understand why residents don't participate, and I will say our curbside blue and black box program participation is very good. Our green bin program participation is good considering it's a non-plastic program, and many of the GTA programs that were cited in the slides are plastic programs, so the yuck factor that Mr. Burry spoke about isn't there in the GTA. The other thing I'll highlight is in Ottawa we have a full collection of multi-residential buildings. Many municipalities do not provide garbage, recycling, or green bin collection in multi-residential buildings. That does, Toronto, with the exception of some of the multi-residential buildings, that does represent a logistics issue for us, especially for the green bin programs, where we recognize we're not getting a lot of uptake in green bin and multi-res despite our efforts, working with property managers, working with residents. The fact is it's just a purely logistics thing. You have to cart your organics down, you have to put them in a bin, you have to do something with your container. So that's a problem that we have to solve, I think, personally, before we make some good inroads in multi-residential recycling and diversion.
I think that if the city knows why people are not recycling or using the green bin, that is probably the most effective information that you have, because you can tackle those specific reasons. And I'd like for this committee to have those reasons articulated for us. I'd like you to share those reasons with us. Can you just remind me that is it the law that multi-dwelling units must have recycling on site, but it's not the case for a green bin? I think I've asked this before. Could you just clarify?
It's not a law, but we do have a bylaw here in Ottawa that requires any apartment building that receives City of Ottawa waste collection that they have to have a recycling program. So, but most municipalities across Ontario consider multi-residential units to be IC&I, industrial, commercial, and institutional. So they're not included in their residential programs. So Ottawa is unique in that virtually all apartment buildings in this city are under the residential program.
They are?
Are.
Okay. And the uptake for recycling in those multi-unit dwellings is good?
Currently, the waste diversion rate in the multi-residential sector is at 17%. So no, it pales in comparison to the curbside program.
Okay, so that should definitely be an immediate focus for our staff is, I mean, I have residents who live in multi-unit dwellings who complain to me that there's no green bin, no e-waste being collected. I go back to my former department in the federal government about once a month to meet colleagues, and there's recycling in the cafeteria, there's no place for food scraps. You just multiply that of how many departments there are, office buildings, that is not being collected. It should be forced. There should be bylaws in this city that says you must be recycling. This should not be an option, and I'm not sure why it remains in 2017 to be an option. Why these entities are not collecting recyclables and collecting food scraps. Anything that can be diverted should be enshrined in bylaw. So has that seriously been considered, and why have we not moved in that direction?
Chair, just a couple points to clarify. All the apartment multi-residential buildings that we do provide garbage pickup for do have black and blue box programs, so that program's in place. As I mentioned earlier, we are struggling with green bin implementation, and again, it's around the yuck factor around logistics. On the IC&I side, that's not our jurisdiction, and I do think the provincial legislation will change the diversion programs and drive the diversion programs in the IC&I sector. through the bans. If they go with a ban on land for food waste at landfill, that will certainly drive that. And if it's producer responsibility, again, that'll drive blue and black box programs.
So just so I'm clear, after today's committee meeting, what are you coming back to this committee with? Councillor Shirelli's asked for some information. I'd like to know the reasons why people choose not to recycle or use the green bins. What is going to be produced after today's meeting, Mr. Chair? Do you know, or can staff clarify?
Chair, the intention is, as I mentioned, in Q1 of 2018, we'll come back with a strategy that covers both the transition to producer responsibility with a recommendation and what that'll mean for the city, and a strategy on organic waste. If there are any directions that committee would like to give us prior to that, we'd be happy to take them.
So, I mean, this doesn't have to be part of the report, but as I said today, I mean, I can get it before Q1, that would be appreciated. Are the reasons why folks don't recycle? I think there are ways that either through the upcoming budget or other initiatives this committee that we can address those sooner rather than later is certainly what I'm interested in. But if that's at your fingertips and you can just release it through this committee, then that would be appreciated.
We'll take that direction, Chair.
Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think part of the participation rate is determined by our communication approach. And I know when you're trying to communicate a message and trying to get participation, if you really believe in something, there's a temptation to try to make everyone else believe it too, even though that may not actually be the best way to get to your goal. So I think we need to determine whether is our goal to get more people to participate or to get them to believe in our reasons for participating. Because if you look at bandwagon communication principles, you discover that it's much easier to get people to participate in something like the green bin, quote, because everyone else is doing it, than it is to try to convince them of the reasons. When we rolled out blue box and black box, first of all, we didn't announce that they were compulsory, but secondly, the emphasis was on the fact that everyone else, more and more each week, more people were using blue box and black box. The approach with green bin for most of its life has been to try to convince people of the reason for using it instead of using general communication principle of bandwagon communications that seems to work as well as just about any other approach. So I think once you get rid of the impediments to usage that Councillor Brockington talked about, then it may be the quickest way to get people to use green bin is just convince them more and more of their neighbors are using it. Because most people never figured out why they were using blue box or black box. They just knew everyone else was. And that was the reason for doing it. So what type of examination are you going to give to simple bandwagon communications?
So, Chair, each campaign that we do does have individual communications objectives, and they do focus on the usage of the green bin in addition to the proper usage of the green bin. So we can definitely take that into consideration moving forward. However, we do focus on the usage of the green bin, not on the belief. I can assure you of that.
All right. On another issue, the Auditor General's report on the green bin. How does the information we've received today echo or answer the Auditor General's report of several years ago, and what's happening in relation to follow-up on the AG report?
And Chair, I can confirm that the Auditor General has put the SSO program on his follow-up work plan for this year.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for this morning's conversation, especially to Waste Watch Ottawa. There is absolutely no doubt that we can do much better. It doesn't take much more than a drive around the city to see that, and especially out on our traditional main streets, you know, you can see that we're not providing opportunities always for waste and for diversion from waste, rather for plastics, papers, and organics. But I just want to come back right now, and obviously, you know, driving around to see how few people use their green bins is always disappointing. I just want to come back to the multi-residential because obviously I have, I guess, probably, maybe not the majority, but half of my ward is likely in multi-residential dwellings. So when you talk about the 17% diversion rate, that is all three combined, blue, black, and green bin, is that correct?
Chair, it's actually only the blue and black box component because the green bins, there are approximately 280 multi-residential buildings that have the green bin program, but it is collected with the curbside trucks. So we don't actually count that tonnage. We have no mechanism for counting that tonnage towards the diversion rate in those buildings. So
okay. No, I understand that.
It's purely blue and black box diversion.
Okay. So that's very low for blue and black box. There's really no reason for it to be that low. So I look forward to the reporting back on how we can increase that. I just wonder, because as you mentioned, Ottawa is, if not the only one of the few municipalities that assumes that responsibility. Others leave it as IC&I diversion. Is that correct?
You're correct.
Okay, so do you know in other municipalities what the rate is in multi-residential buildings? Although it's not their responsibility, it's IC&I. Do you know how we compare?
Yeah, unfortunately, most of them are IC&I, and so there is no tonnage numbers, and for those, you know, they don't have to report out. So municipalities like Toronto, they have some buildings on the blue and black box programs, but it's not across the city. So it's, you know, it's cherry picked through the city basically. We're the only municipality in Ontario that provides that service to every building.
So we have no way then of determining how well we're doing with respect to, like, vis-a-vis other municipalities in multi-residential diversion.
We can look into it. There might be some information on OMBI for the multi-residential sector, but I don't have it available at this time.
Well, I'll leave it at that. I just, you know, I want to echo some of the concerns today from the chair and some of my colleagues. I think that, you know, I realize that the province is moving to, you know, a new system that will put more onus on the producer, and that needs to happen, obviously. But I think that, you know, as a municipality, we do have some 24 recommendations here. They are low cost, especially if we consider what the cost will be, you know, if we, whether it's exact or not, but 1% decrease, meaning a 1% extension of our landfill. Just that, if all you care about is money, you know, just that should compel us to be investing more in diverting waste and ultimately reducing our footprint. We have to get serious as a municipality. We're a large municipality, and I will be looking forward to what staff can bring back that on some of the recommendations here today in front of us that will have an impact going forward, and understanding that we are going to transition into a system provincially, but some of these recommendations will happen regardless. So I do look forward to that, and we'll be watching very carefully. Thank you.
Sorry, a reminder please that the media is supposed to stay back behind barriers there.
All right, after Councillor McKinney, I had Councillor Kakish.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to staff for the presentation. One of the main issues I hear from residents about who don't use the green bin is usually, other than philosophical, is the yuck factor that I think was referenced a bit earlier. So I'm wondering if this is a good opportunity to refresh the strategy or the communications on how to use the green bin perhaps, and also down the road in the future when we do renegotiate, if there's things that we can do in order to improve that yuck factor, because a lot of residents do raise that at the door. That's one of the reasons I hear, is that they don't use the green bin for that. And you know, we had the maggots and some of the stories early on in the rollout a few years back. So is that something that we can do within that $350,000, or is that something that's already been spent and done in terms of a refresh? And then what else can we do in the future as well in terms of making it more friendly for residents to use?
And Chair, we definitely can provide tips on how to use the green bin as the program sits today, and we do that ongoing. In terms of looking forward to refreshing the strategy, that's something that we're going to have to deal with. Unfortunately, we have a current contract, so we have to work within the confines of that contract, and we hope to have an answer to that in Q1 of 2018.
And so when that contract is over, though, there might be opportunities of doing things that would make it more friendly for residents to use.
And Chair, unfortunately, that contract runs till 2030, so we have to try and work with our service provider until that time.
In terms of we heard a lot about the high-rise rates and how low they are, under 20%. And I know this is not new because this has come up in the past as well, and we said we want this to be a focus and we want to go in and to reach out to those landlords and to the multi-residential. So what have we been doing since that last conversation, and why hasn't it been as successful as we had hoped?
There has been a communications campaign where you've seen the image in the presentation where the blue bag was introduced. So it was an effort to try and make it easier for residents. So in terms of communications, there has been a concerted effort on the that will continue to demonstrate how to make it easier. Yes.
But in terms of doing one-on-one, say, with various landlords or major landlords in the city, have we been doing that outreach? Because I remember this came up last year or whenever we had this conversation, and we knew there was a problem with the multi-units, and we said we were going to try to go in and do some outreach and that sort of thing. Not just communications, but more one-on-one with those landlords. So have we been doing that, and what has the response been? Are we not getting a good response, or?
Yes, Chair, we have developed a program where we reach out to the property managers. So we have an updated package that each property manager gets that explains exactly how the program works, because really they are the key to the success in the program. We have outreach staff and waste inspectors that will go directly and speak with the property managers to address any concerns or issues. So we work directly one-on-one because each building is unique and has unique problems. So we troubleshoot with them directly to try and enhance the program.
And from your observations, have generally most of them been receptive to working and having those bins available to residents to use?
We have found that buildings that have site property managers tend to be much more successful in diversion. And so, you know, higher end condos, we do have superstars in the city that are achieving over 50% diversion. So it is doable, but it is not easy.
And so if you look at the charts, and I know the public delegation had their charts as well, do you dispute those numbers in terms of are we is it a bumpy ride, or is it consistent, or in terms of diversion across the city in general?
Chair, I know Mr. Burry said that the numbers are consistent with what we presented in our memo, but I think it's important to make the distinction that the numbers that Waste Watch took from the Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority is really about funding programs. The numbers in OMBI is about diverting waste. And the distinction is the producers pay for only the packaging that they put in the waste stream. So for instance, we collect hardcover books in our program and we divert them, but they don't pay for that, so that's not in those numbers. We do some scrap metal picking off the lines at MRF. They don't pay for that, and that's not in the numbers. So that's why staff would prefer to use the OMBI numbers versus these numbers, which are specifically for funding the programs and only for those materials that are eligible to be funded.
Okay. Yeah, I'll conclude with the point I started with. I think we are in this contract for the long haul, so I think any opportunities we can to encourage residents, especially the ones that have been less open to use it, in terms of doing a refresh strategy perhaps, and highlighting the reasons, be it the ones that Councillor Shirelli pointed out earlier or the ones that make it more friendly for residents, based on at least the feedback that I hear. That's a big something that deters a lot of people from using it. Certainly was the yuck factor, and so if there's things we can do or campaigns that we can do to get around that, I think we'll have better rates, you know, and not just the high rise, but in the other communities as well, that suburban communities, for example.
The staff would agree, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lieber.
Thanks, Chair. Very briefly, when was our communication strategy last focus group tested to see what the effectiveness of it would be?
I'll have to get back to you on the exact year. It has been a few years to do some focus group testing and some research.
Okay, my urging, and Mr. Wiley and I and Marilyn spoke about this some time ago. There's an opportunity to loop residents into creating materials for us as well. When the Green Bin program was first launched, I remember there was a youngster who had designed a kitchen liner newspaper, and that went viral. People were like, "Oh, that's a great way for me to minimize some of the mess on my countertop, is by lining my bin." There are other probably tips and tricks that residents have found over the past few years to minimize some of that yuck factor, and trying to loop residents in to create some of that collateral could be more compelling than the current message, which, forgive me if it's inaccurate, but sounds like this is what goes in what bin. And that is the extent of at least what I'm seeing in social media and in the communications that are coming out of the city. So an encouragement for you there. Another question, and I will raise it every time we talk about diversion, is the backyard composting. It has dropped off the radar at the city. When I read the Waste Explorer, the only choice for my apple core is to put that into the green bin. If our ultimate goal is to prevent materials from going into the landfill, backyard composting is cheaper, it is cleaner, and residents wind up with black gold product at the end of it. Why do we not talk about backyard composting anymore?
Chair, certainly we promote backyard composting. We have information that's available on how to build your own backyard composter. So, and we encourage people to continue to use their backyard composters. A lot of our information that we've put out is there are materials that go in the green bin that cannot go in your backyard composter, such as fish and meat and dairy products. And so the two complement each other, are not, one should not take away from the other.
Okay. When I look at, for example, the Waste Explorer, there's really no stream for the backyard composter. I know I raised this at the beginning of the term of council. We're talking about diversion again, and I would again strongly urge staff to make sure that residents know what can go in their backyard composter when they're taking a look at their choices for how to deal with the various types of waste that they produce. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. I have a few questions myself, and then I'll have some closing remarks on this issue. Interestingly, just on the backyard composter, it was certainly my experience that despite a lot of commitment to doing it, it was actually much harder to successfully do, to actually get your materials to compost. You needed a sunny location, you needed the right mix of carbon and nitrogen. getting my chemistry right, and if you were away for a while, it would cool down. So I think what we found is a lot of residents, and I'm asking this as a question, if you can confirm, that a lot of people started with goodwill. A ton of composters went out there, and they ended up becoming solid waste. The composter themselves 5-10 years later, because between critters eating through them or just people realized that they didn't have the space, they didn't have the sun, they didn't have the right materials at the right time. It was harder to do than we had hoped. Is that an accurate characterization of that?
I don't really have any statistics on it. I know my mom's a diehard backyard composter, and she does awesome at it, so.
Yeah, I think that perhaps that description itself is the answer. A diehard can do an excellent job at it, but it does take work. So, but thank you for raising it, because I think they're complementary for those people who want to and have means. That's fantastic. Please keep doing it. But the fact that there are other materials that should not go in, maybe with 1.5 meters of snow in the backyard, you'd rather be using your green bin for those months of the year. They really, I think, should be seen as complementary. The Recollect online tool was flashed up there as one of your bullets. I think that's really essential to highlight and maybe use better. My question would be, the Recollect, for those who don't immediately know what I'm talking about, is what you can sign up for, and you get on whatever device you want. You get that reminder on, in my case, Tuesday, just after 6 p.m., friendly reminder, here's what goes out tomorrow, or a friendly reminder, it was a holiday on Monday, so it doesn't go out tomorrow, it goes out a day later, and messages on a particular topic. What is the take-up of that tool? Do we have any sense, percentage number, raw number, or percentage-wise of eligible addresses who have signed up for it?
Sorry. Chair, it's 68,000 households have signed up for the Recollect tool, and there's approximately 280,000 curbside homes in the city. So,
well, here's where I'm going with that. I think we really need to drive the sign up for that tool, because I find it indispensable not only to get the day right and to get the right color of bin right, or green or garbage out there, and we all see, we're probably in one of them, the bin that shouldn't be out there, that just sat there for 3-4 days before someone realized and brought it back in. And then the ability to push messages, whether it's the helpful hints on how to use it, whether it's the stats on how you're helping save the money. Councillor Shrell both got at the motivation for people. Do we have the total ability to craft it's some off-site, maybe an out-of-city organization that runs the tool, I believe, but do we as a city have the full control over the actual messaging that goes out?
yes, we do.
Yeah. So as we understand better why people aren't participating, what kind of messaging focus group would work with people, we could use that tool better and get it out to more people. I think that's the direction I would offer, and certainly conclusion of my own.
I just want to add, Chair, the absolute benefit of forwarding it to your teenage son.
Of course. Just a reminder, you're on duty tonight. Yeah. Thank you. The question of why some don't participate is really important, and we have all kinds of, I suppose, anecdotal knowledge on that. To me, walking down the street on my way home, or on the morning of, usually on the way home after the pickup has happened, tells me a lot. And before anyone thinks that the chair is spying and noting individual addresses, certainly not. It's more the sense of, oh, someone got the wrong container out, why is this still full and not picked up? Did our crews not do the job? Oh no, it's the wrong color. You look in and go, oh, it's a mix of cans and paper. Someone's not understanding. That's in a neighborhood with a large campus rental population. That can be part of it. It can be students who don't understand or maybe aren't sharing their duties as well as they're washing their dishes. We've all been there. But it's not just students by any means. I certainly see, so you get a sense what isn't happening, what's happening wrong, but that's really anecdotal. It's not scientific. So I guess more than a question, I guess it's already been asked. I think our having more scientific, I guess, data-driven understanding of just what are those obstacles to people. And some of them aren't easy to solve. We know that. Anyone who's got having a challenge making enough money and working 2 jobs in the day, low on their list is going to be making sure they get the right bin out. People with mental health issues, physical disabilities, people who don't have a place to store, those are all going to be challenges. But I think we may not be able to solve all of those, but we can certainly try to. Finally, a question would be the design of new buildings. Can you remind me what the rules are, or what direction our planning, our review staff have when a new multi-residential building comes in? Is it mandatory that they design in a storage space and the actual physical ability to do this, or is it entirely left up to them?
Chair, the planning department several years ago implemented site plan guidance documents for waste collection. So given that all multi-residential units are eligible to receive city service, in order for them to receive that service, they have to comply with those site plan guidance documents. So documents, it provides adequate allowances for bin storage. It provides for easy access for our waste collection contractors to get to those bins. So as a go forward, I think the new buildings within the city are well situated to have, adequate space for green, blue, black, and garbage collection. The problem is the older buildings, some of them, definitely predate even recycling programs. And especially in the downtown core, there's back alleys, they don't have parking garages. And it's really hard to go in after the fact and make space for additional recycling bins in areas where there's just no area for them to put those bins. So on a go forward, we're going to be fine. It's how do we deal with those old buildings that are largely in the downtown core?
And I get that, but if I can short, then it is mandatory to get the site plan approval. My worry is that might sometimes slip inadvertently. I believe the approvals for Lansdowne, for example, just predated that process. So I know, and you know, we have challenges with some of all things, 3-4-year-old buildings that actually were not designed, in a couple of cases, were not designed with adequate storage space for people, and the incredible amount of extra work and money that goes in to trying to service that sort of a unit. So I think it's really essential that we ensure that that's rigorously applied, that people don't somehow manage to get building approvals, site plan approvals without that. Do we have stats on that? Do we know if there's slippage in recent buildings?
Chair, in the last few years, all site plans for multi-residential buildings are coming through the solid waste department, so we sign off. We're part of the sign off on those site plans, so there should not be any slippage.
I'm glad to hear that, because although it's really hard work to do it with older buildings, as you say, there should be no reason building should not have this, so that the fact that you're part of that process is reassuring. Thank you. Those are my questions. Are there any others who had further questions? Okay, I just have a few sum-up comments then. Obviously, there's plenty of room for improvement. We heard that, of course, from Waste Watch Ottawa. Those of us here on the committee are aware of that, and I know our staff are fully aware of that. Understanding why people aren't participating seems to be key, and it often isn't simple. It's not just ill will. It's a range of reasons that we do need to understand better. There's an opportunity to use that Recollect tool, and above all, from the numbers, the stats that I just got here, it's the first time I had asked and had those statistics. Clearly, at 68,000, well, that sounds great. It's my quick math tells me it was barely a quarter of eligible addresses. So. Through my chair here today, I encourage people to sign up for the Recollect tool, but certainly to our staff to look at communications abilities to drive interest in that. And we as councillors with our columns, for example, remind people that's of all things, it's a very useful tool. None of us want to get the date wrong and be stuck with our bi-weekly garbage for another 2 weeks, for example. Our strength is our weakness is something I would put out there. The fact that the City of Ottawa is the only or one of the very few cities in Ontario that does offer collection services to our multi-residential buildings. The way I would put it this is we've expanded the denominator. The number of eligible buildings has gotten big, but we are slowly chipping away at the numerator, so it actually brings our stats down. It makes us look worse in terms of the percentage of participation, whereas actually we're trying to do a good thing by making the service available. So I would just put that out there. We need to keep that in mind when we look at the numbers, that our percentage participation may partly be a factor of offering it now to new people who are hard to get the service to. I do want to thank staff who, it was asked how hard is the city working to get some of those residential buildings onto the program. I've had the pleasure of going out and doing a couple of grip and grin presentation of certificates and thanks to some of the building managers who have done an excellent job. But it is, if I'm not mistaken, one building at a time. It's a personal touch. It's helping people through it. It's encouraging it. It's not as if we've got landlords that own 100 buildings saying, thou shalt all participate, go to it. I think it's harder and slower than that. So I thank you for the work, but I encourage you, of course, to keep chipping away at that. On avoiding the yuck, that term's used enough, but that really is clear what we hear from so many people. The organics gets messy inside your building, it gets messy in the bin, but there are all sorts of tips for doing that better. I've got tips myself on how I do it better, but I'm not sure every resident's coming to me to ask for them, which I guess highlights the fact that the city has produced some tips, and we have ideas of sort of resident to resident, how can we do better? But ultimately, I think the challenge is to get the people who should be receiving the message to want to receive. We can't make someone use our tools, and I guess that's where focus testing is being raised. We can do a better job there. So really, I'm summing up a lot of what I've heard and some of those ideas. And again, in closing, I thank everyone for having this item on the table today. I think there's been a lot of useful discussion and valuable takeaways from it. So on this verbal update then, don't know, do we receive a verbal update? Received. Thank you. That then takes us to no in-camera items, IPDs. Those are received unless someone wants to lift either of those. And finally, notices of motions. Do we have any? Seeing none. Inquiries. I believe Councillor Brockington had one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a two-parter, and it certainly coincides with the discussion we've had today, but is a reflection of what I've witnessed in my own ward, particularly in the summer months. So first question, how can the city significantly increase the collection of recyclables in city parks? And secondly, how can the city work with festivals and special event organizers to ensure recycling facilities are available on site and that packaging used for food is environmentally friendly, i.e. not styrofoam? So I'm not going to elaborate at this point, but those are two major issues that are an issue in my ward, and I would like to have staff comment on increasing recycling capabilities. Thank you.
Any other inquiries? Seeing none then. Any other business? And motion to adjourn then. Yes. Yep. Carried. Thank you very much. Next meeting will be the 21st of November 2017. A reminder that that will be our budget discussion. Please be there.